Awesome. All right. So that kicks us off, and we're going to be picking up where we left off in the chapter two employers and on page 141. And what we were talking about sort of before and up to this point in this chapter was we were talking about how an employer could possibly kind of save or offer this way of life to an ailing employee. And where we're going to pick up is the one, two, three, third paragraph. It's right near the bottom, like it's the bottom full paragraph where it says, perhaps you have a man in mind. And in this paragraph, it is going to summarize all the requirements that were asked of the potential employer. So we saw a series of requirements for the employer, and we're going to see those summarized right here in this paragraph on page 141. So it says, perhaps you have a man in mind. He wants to stop drinking and you want to help him, even if it be only a matter of good business. And see, when we kicked this thing off, we were seeing that, like, hey, we were seeing this like a pull to the emotions. Like, man, these are human beings who have suffered and we want to help them. But we are also using a pull to like logic and business and like, hey, it's expensive, to train people for this sort of work. So we're like, whatever your motives are, motives off on a tangent already. Often what I've found in Alcoholics Anonymous or in 12 Steps, my motives don't matter as much as I think they do. You know what I'm saying? I always want to check my motives before, making an amends or sponsoring somebody. Never want to check my motives before getting into a brand new relationship. You know what I mean? That's not what I want to check them. So regardless of the motives of trying to help somebody, we're willing to help this person. And it says, now you know more about alcoholism. And that's what we're talking about. That idea that, we read the chapters on alcoholism. And it was saying there's a solution more about alcoholism, really good chapters to read. And it says, you can see that he is mentally and physically sick. And for those that are new to this study or new to kind of what we're talking about, when we talk about being physically sick, what we're talking about is a physical allergy. And you can make a note of that in your book if you're writing in the book. And why wouldn't you? It's a whole lot of fun, Yeah. But when we talk about being physically sick, we're talking about the physical allergy. And that's that thing that happens once I take a drink or a drug or I engage in a compulsive action. There's that thing that sets off inside of me that tells me more. And the more that I drink, the more that I need to drink, or the more that I use, the more that I need to use, or the more that I gamble, the more I need to gamble. You know what I'm saying? Once I start, I can't stop. That is the physical allergy. And that's what it means to be physically sick. And it says, you can see that he is mentally and physically sick. And we talk about being mentally sick. What we're talking about is the mental obsession, the obsession of the mind. And you can make a note of that if you want, because I always think it's fun to write in our books. But what we're talking about is that thought that I have when I am as sober as I am today and my illness is untreated. It looks a lot like this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. I'll go out for 3 drinks. There's no alcoholics in Illinois. My problem was drinking with all those Canadians, getting loaded with the Canadians. But man, I'll be fine in Illinois. There's drunks here. I found them. They're great. They're my friends. Oh, they're the Davids. Some of them. I got to hang out with the Davids. It's not Land of Lincoln. It's Land of Davids out here in Illinois. See, I could have tied that in with the announcements and I forgot to. And so we're talking about that mental obsession, that insane thought that I have when I'm sober that tells me this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. I'll just go out for one. I'm going to kill myself anyway, so why don't I get drunk or high or whatever? That's what we're talking about, mentally and physically sick. So we have somebody in mind. We want to help them. We understand the illness a little bit better. And this is the next requirement. You're willing to overlook his past performance. So we're willing to let go of what has happened in the past. That's what we're talking about. And it says, suppose an approach is made something like this. Now, these are the directions. And I think that these directions can also be quite helpful when we're working with sponsees, when we're, talking to people that we want to help in our 12-step world, our 12-step way of life. It says, state that you know about his drinking and that it must stop. Say that you appreciate his abilities, that you would like to keep him, but cannot if he continues to drink. A firm attitude at this point has helped many of us. So I want to be clear. If I'm working with a sponsee, I'm like, you got to stop drinking. Well, they can't, they're an alcoholic. They don't have that power. They don't have that ability. So what we're talking about is when we talk about like helping our sponsees, being really direct and honest. And now we don't have to do that in an argumentative or a difficult sort of way. But if you suspect something's going on with your sponsee, maybe you get a feeling your sponsee's been relapsing, or they're keeping a secret, or something's off. You don't have to be like, hey, but we can say, hey, something's off. What's going on? You know what I mean? That directness. But in the context of two employers, it's saying, hey, I know you're drinking and it's got to stop. And so we're setting that boundary, communicating honestly, as it were. So it says a firm attitude at this point has helped many of us. Next, he can be assured that you do not intend to lecture, moralize, or condemn. So we're not here to lecture. We're not here to be a nag. We're not here to shame. We were talking about this on the drive into Illinois. That idea that shame is not an effective motivator. At least that's been my experience. Has anyone ever been shamed into permanent change? I haven't. I've been shamed into some temporary changes and then more shame. I have not found shame to be an effective way to help people. So that's not what we're here to do. We're not here to lecture, moralize, or condemn. And it says if this was done formally, it was because of misunderstanding. And you know what I love about that? There's a sneaky little, now it's not a perfect amends, but there's an ownership where it's saying like, listen, if I lectured you, if I nagged you as your boss, if I nagged you as your employer, man, I didn't mean to do it. It was because I did not understand the nature of your illness. So not a perfect amends, but we're seeing some hints of ownership of our mistakes. So if possible, express a lack of hard feeling towards him. So not being angry, not being resentful, not being judgmental, that sort of thing. And it says, at this point, it might be well to explain alcoholism, the illness. And I know we just talked about it a paragraph or so up. We're on page 142 for those that joined. Although I'm pretty sure Rob probably put that in the chat and I just can't see the chat. I'm on a tablet, but now it's a completely different tablet. We're just doing the best we can. Hanging out in a basement with a Directo overhead. Whee! I'm having a great time. But when we explain alcoholism, the illness, what we're explaining is the lack of control. That once I start, I cannot stop. But we're also explaining the lack of choice. That I say that I want to stop. I say that I have to stop. I say that I need to stop. And I mean it with everything in me. And my lack of choice, I drink and use again. That's what we're talking about. Explain that. And as people who ourselves are in recovery, it's imperative that I understand those things myself. I understand my illness. I got to be properly armed with facts about myself. And it says, say that you believe he is a gravely ill person. To be gravely ill is fatal. And what makes this illness fatal is that idea that I cannot control the amount that I take. And yet I continue to go back to it. It's ruining my life. It's destroying my life. It is killing me. And I try to put anything and everything that I can between me and that first drink, first drug, first compulsive act, and I can't stop. And that is what makes it fatal. So say that you believe he's a gravely ill person. With this qualification being perhaps fatally ill, does he want to get well? We're just asking. Does he want to get well? You ask because many alcoholics being warped and drugged do not want to quit, but does he? Will he take every necessary step, submit to anything to get well, to stop drinking forever? And you might want to make a note of this question because we're going to do a bit of a bounce around. And by a bit, I mean, we're going to bounce around a whole lot. We're going to be like, put your finger in this page of the book. We're going to be bouncing because this is a question that we are going to see has been asked again and again and again throughout this book. This question is is a beautiful theme. You want to get well. Will you submit to any necessary step, do anything to get well, to stop drinking forever? Let's pop over to page 42. We're going to take a big bounce. Page 42. And we're going to go, we're going to go. It says, page 42. It's the second or the first full paragraph right in the middle of the page. It says, 2 of the members of Alcoholics Anonymous came to see me. They grinned, which I didn't like so much, and then asked me if I thought myself an alcoholic and if I were really licked this time. To be licked in this context would be to be like really beaten down by alcoholism. Am I done? Am I hopeless? Like, do I think I have this illness? Am I willing to do whatever it takes to get well? So we see that question, or the hint of that question, on page 42. Now let's pop over to how it works, and let's go to page 58. I know I go kind of quickly with the page number, so I'll do a little natural pause. Ooh, it's not natural, it's an awkward pause, but we're going to live in the uncomfortability of the silence. Page 58, rock and roll. And let's go. Let's go down. It's going to be the second full paragraph. Our stories disclose. That's where we're at. Page 58, our stories disclose. It says, our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. And here's that same question again. If you have decided you want what we have, so do I want what these people in 12-step recovery have? And if you're wondering, or if you're new, what do we have? And I just want to throw it out there, because what we have is permanent. Now I'll throw an asterisk on there. That permanent is contingent on the actions that I take on a daily basis, but permanent, contented sobriety. That's what's on offer. Do I want that? By the way, at no point if the answer is no, is there any shame? It's like, that's cool. You don't have to, right? No peer pressure is involved. Although I do hear it's what all the cool kids are doing. I'm just kidding. So if you decided you want what we have, do I want this? And am I willing to go to any length to get it? Am I willing to go to any lengths? There it is. Am I willing to submit to any necessary step, to go to any lengths? It says, then you are ready to take certain steps. It's the 12 steps, if you're wondering what those are. And now let's pop over to page 90. Page 90, we're gonna see it asked again and again and again. So page 90, and we're going to the 1, 2, 3, third full paragraph. Third full paragraph on page 90. And by the way, I'm going real slow because there's a couple times I've gone through this and I'm like, yeah, like it says on 90, 40, 42, 58, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, slow down page. So I'm trying to do it slow on purpose. So we're all on the same page. Rock and roll. Page 90. It says, sometimes it is wise to wait until he goes on a binge. The family may object to this, but unless he is in dangerous physical condition, it's better to risk it. Don't deal with him when he is very drunk unless he is ugly or the family needs your help. Wait for the end of the spree, or at least for a lucid interval. Then let his family or friend ask him. Now, here is the question again. Ask him if he wants to quit drinking for good, and if he would go to any extreme to do so. There's that question, or questions asked again. And it says, if he said yes, then his attention should be drawn to you as a person who has recovered. And now we're not done. Let's pop over to page 112. Page 112, we're in 2 wives, rock and roll. And 112, and we're going to go to the bottom of the page, very bottom paragraph. It says suppose. Page 112, suppose, bottom paragraph. It says, suppose, however, your husband fits the description of number 2. The same principles which apply to husband number 1 should be practiced. But after his next binge, and here it is, ask him if he would really like to get over drinking for good. Do not ask that he do it for you or anyone else. Just, would he like to? And so we're seeing this thread throughout the book. We're seeing it on 42, 58, 90, page 112, and back on page 142. So let's pop back over to page 142. Hopefully that's easy to find. I didn't say like stick your finger there or like I didn't say use a bookmark, but if you're classy, you can have a bookmark. I'm not classy. I just jam my hand in so I can find it. Alrighty, page 142. And I'll just repeat the question. It says, so say that you believe he is a gravely ill person, with this qualification being fatally ill. Does he want to get well? You ask because many alcoholics being warped and drugged do not want to quit, but does he? Will he take every necessary step, submit to anything to get well, to stop drinking forever? If he says yes, does he really mean it? Or down inside, does he think he's fooling you? And then after rest and treatment, he will be able to get away with a few drinks now and then. We believe a man should be thoroughly probed on these points. So really asking, like, hey, are you really done? Or are you thinking, listen, I'm going to go away to rehab and then I'm going to be able to have beers with the boys, Like, are you really willing to let go of all of it? And it says, be satisfied. He's not deceiving himself or you. So really asking, do you want to do this thing? I've been joking around about it lately, but I'm like, the 12 steps are consensual. You know what I mean? We're not going to make you do it. Like, we want that enthusiastic yes. Like, I want to do this work. That's what we're after. And if no, that's cool. Like, that's cool. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. But that is what we have to offer. The 12-step fellowships around the world are kind of about the 12 steps, hence the name. You know what I'm saying? All righty. So whether you mention this book is a matter for your discretion. If he temporizes and still thinks he can ever drink again, even beer. So to temporize would be like, go out and try some controlled drinking. So I'm just going to slow down, right? Temporize. Even beer. He might as well be discharged. To be discharged in this context is fired. He might as well be discharged after the next bender, which, if an alcoholic, he is almost certain to have. And we know that because I got this allergy, right? If I'm trying some controlled drinking, or I'm trying some controlled drug use, or I'm trying to switch my substances around, if I got this allergy, man, it is going to take me. And it is only a matter of time before I have that next bender. And it's saying, if that's the case, fire him. And that's what we were talking about last week, that I need to experience that hopelessness. And it's from that place of hopelessness that I'm able to grab a hold of the hope that is on offer. So he should understand that emphatically. So with emphasis, we're saying, like, man, if you want to keep drinking, you're going to be fired after the next bender. The next time you call in sick, like, you're gone. That's what it's saying. Either you're dealing with a man who can and will get well, or you're not. If not, why waste time? This may seem severe, but it is usually the best course. And what I want to point out is, we're not talking about somebody that's a non-alcoholic or somebody that's just having a tough time. We're talking about somebody who's doomed to drink again. And we'll see. Now, I'm about to surround again, so please bear with me. We're going to see similar instructions on page 96. Why don't we pop over there? I warned you, we're going to bounce. So page 96. And on page 96, we're going to go to the first paragraph, and some of you guys know this paragraph real well. But page 96, first paragraph. Do not be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. Search out another alcoholic and try again. You are sure to find someone desperate enough to accept with eagerness, that enthusiasm, that consent, that, like, I'm willing to do this thing. Accept with eagerness what you offer. We find it a waste of time to keep chasing a man who cannot or will not work with you. If you leave such a person alone, he may soon become convinced he cannot recover by himself. So what we're doing is, if somebody's not interested, I have to let them have the dignity of their experience. And in the context of two employers, if they're not interested in recovery, I need to let them have the dignity of their experience, but I get to honor my limitations, which in the context of two employers is, I can't have an employee that shows up drunk, or, you know what I mean? Or goes goes missing, because I would go missing. I'd be off, you know? So it says to spend too much time on any one situation is to deny some other alcoholic an opportunity to live and be happy. One of our fellowship failed entirely with his first half dozen, that means 6 prospects. He often says that if he had continued to work on them, he might have deprived many others who have since recovered of their chance. So let's pop back over to page 142. And page 142, very, very, very bottom paragraph. It says, after satisfying yourself that your man wants to recover and that he will go to any extreme to do so, you may suggest a definite course of action. So this is what the definite course of action is going to be. And we're going to talk a little about being physically detox, withdrawing, but also we're going to talk about working the steps here in a little bit. So it says, for most alcoholics who are drinking or just getting over a spree, a certain amount of physical treatment is desirable, even imperative. So they're saying it's a good idea, and sometimes it's of the utmost importance. Now, it talks about that a number of times in the doctor's opinion. It talks about where it says on, we don't have to necessarily bounce around here, but XXVI, though we work, I'm gonna bounce around very, very, very quickly. But XXVI in the doctor's opinion, bottom paragraph, though we work our solution on the spiritual as well as altruistic plane. So spiritual solution, spiritual awakening, that's our 12 step. And altruism is helping other people because it's the right thing to do, right? We favor hospitalization for the alcoholic who is very jittery or befogged. So detox, going through that detox process. More often than not, it is imperative. And Rob, I just saw Rob got the definition of imperative because it was on 142. It's XXVI, of the utmost importance. It's needed that a man's brain be cleared before he is approached, as he is then a better chance of understanding and accepting what we have to offer. So that oftentimes people need to detox or to go through the detox process to, be able to work the steps, which is the suggestion that's offered. Like that can be really helpful. We see that again, it's at the very bottom of XXVII and top of XXVIII. So if you did bounce with me to the doctor's opinion, just go across the page and the bottom. It says, of course, an alcoholic ought to be freed from his physical craving for liquor. And we talk about craving, we're talking about that physical allergy, that once I start, I need more. And this often requires a definite hospital procedure before psychological measures can be of maximum benefit. So what it's saying is sometimes people do need to go to detox first to get, physically separated, to get a day or two, between us and our last drink, or us and our last use, to get through the withdrawal symptoms. So that's what it's talking about. And why I do a lot of bouncing around isn't just because I have undiagnosed ADHD. Part of why I do a lot of bouncing around, especially in the later chapters, is because I feel oftentimes they're we hear them as the forgotten chapters, the lost chapters. They're not often studied, but sometimes it's because we don't think they're applicable. But I love to point out that the themes and the information that we see throughout the book is continued on. This is not brand new information. This is a continuation of information that we have been studying, and themes and ideas that we have been going throughout this whole thing. So that's where I'm at. That's why I do it. And then probably the thing about, my lack of attention, it's probably that too. Let's be honest, woo, I forget. All right. So back on 143. Very top of the page. I didn't even finish the paragraph. I bounced this around mid-sentence, So physical treatment is desirable, often imperative. The matter of physical treatment should, of course, be referred to your own doctor. We're not doctors, although back in the day, I did write a few of my own prescriptions. It says, whatever the method, it's object. So the purpose is to thoroughly clear the mind and body of the effects of alcohol. So to be fully detoxed. In competent hands, this seldom, rarely takes long, nor is it very expensive. Your man will fare better if he is placed in a physical condition that he can think straight and no longer craves liquor. So again, when we talk about craving, we're talking about that physical allergy that once I start, I need more, I need more. So getting through physically detox. If you propose such a procedure to him, it may be necessary to advance the cost of treatment, but we believe it should be made plain to him that any expense will be later deducted from his pay. I was working with a sponsee one time who had really tried to angle herself into getting to an expensive rehab. Oh, she did not like that suggestion. She's like, I don't, no, they were paying for a nice one. And it's, nope. But there is something about this. It goes on to say it is better for him to feel fully responsible. And even though we're not talking about the seventh tradition, we see some themes as it pertains to the seventh tradition. That idea that in 12-step, whatever 12-step fellowship you belong to, that we pay our own way, right? Alcoholics Anonymous, a gaggle of alcoholics insisting that we don't take handouts? What? You know what I mean? A revolutionary idea. We pay for ourselves. And yes, if you're wondering, a gaggle is the proper terminology. I'm kidding, it's not. I just, I think of us like geese, Anyway, but that's the thing, is we get to be responsible and take responsibility, and if we're new, it's like, I don't get to, doesn't sound exciting, but it's true, we get to. And there's something about man, I'm responsible, So it says, if your man accepts your offer, it should be pointed out. Now, this is important for all of us, that physical treatment is but a small part of the picture. Physical sobriety is not a solution to alcoholism. Physical sobriety is not a solution to addiction. Abstinence is not a solution to whatever brings us to this all-inclusive study. And we know that experientially, because if you're hanging out with me on a Monday night, I really am glad you are. But if you had the ability to stay sober on your own power, you would not be listening to me right now. You know what I'm saying? I am the last refuge of the truly desperate on a Monday night. So welcome, y'all are the real deal if you're hanging out with me, because I'm sure there's something else going on, But that idea that sobriety is not enough, abstinence is not enough, and this can be a thing that if I have this illness as laid out in this book, rehab is not enough. Sober living is not enough. And I want to be very clear, there is nothing wrong with rehab, detox, sober living, any of that stuff. And for non-alcoholics, people that do not have the illnesses laid out in this book, it by itself is a solution. And it can be wonderful, wonderful places for people like us to go to get some stability. But unless I have a spiritual awakening, I'm going to relapse. So sobriety is not enough. It's a small part of the picture. So it says, though you are providing him with the best possible medical attention, which I love that Hank kind of put that in. It's it shouldn't be too expensive, but no, we're giving you the best, It's kind of neat being in the States, because you go through the highways and you see these advertisements for different hospitals, and you don't see that so much in Canada. And I'm like, oh, is that one better than that one? You know what I mean? You get to pick and choose. And so it's oh, send me to the best one. But if I got to be responsible for paying it back, maybe I don't want to go to the best one. You know what I'm saying? I'm just joking around. So it says, though you are providing him with the best possible medical attention, he should understand, and this is what we need to understand, that he must, it's a little musty in here, you know what I'm pointing out? There's some musts. There's a must. He must undergo a change of heart. Now, some of you guys know I love my sneaky descriptions. I love my sneaky anythings. I'm And so two employers, as we were talking about last week, this is the only chapter that does not specifically mention God or a higher power specifically. But I will point out it is alluded to, because what is a change of heart? A spiritual awakening. To get over drinking, to get over whatever brings you to the study. What do I need? A spiritual awakening, a change of heart. And here is a continuation or another description of a spiritual awakening. It's a two for one. It's a buy one, get one free sale. I don't know. BOGO. Spiritual awakening descriptions. So it says, he should understand that he must undergo a change of heart. To get over drinking will require a transformation of thought and attitude. Again, a transformation of thought and attitude is a spiritual awakening. And it says we had to place recovery above everything. For without recovery, we would have lost both home and business. Often in the rooms, we'll hear, you have to put recovery first. You have to put recovery first. And it's probably a misquote of page 143. I need to put this relationship, the spiritual awakening first. Because if I do not, I will drink again, or I will use again, or I will act out compulsively again. And if I do that, I will lose home and business. Recovery, God, higher power, creator, the spiritual awakening that I need to grow, that has to come first for someone like me. But there is something that is true, at least in my experience. When I put this first, man, I show up as the best version of myself in all areas of my life. I don't want to say I'm like a first class page, because that feels a little, but I'm like, this is the best we're getting. No, I shouldn't talk about, because I don't want to sell the power of God short. But you know what I mean? When I put this first, the person that I am with my family, the person that I am with friends, the person that I am in all areas of my life, man, it is somebody I did not think I could be, but always wanted to be. You know what I mean? Like if I put this first, it's first class. It is a first class life I get to live. And I get to show up and in a way that I never thought possible. So, and this, by the way, this next paragraph, this is Paige. Like this is what I was last week. I'm talking about Hank and I are homies. This is what I mean. So it says, can you have every confidence in his ability to recover? Oh, well, on the subject of confidence, right? It's like, it's literally me on a tangent. It's like, I brought up it and then I'm off on it, So can you have every confidence in his ability to recover? Well, on the subject of confidence, how do we get on that topic? Can you adopt the attitude that so far as you are concerned, that this will be a strictly personal matter, that is alcoholic dereliction. So the derelictions being like the struggles and the not great things that we've done, the treatment about to be undertaken will never be discussed without his consent. So we're talking about keeping that stuff confidential. And maybe in 2024, like that's pretty obvious. Like there's HIPAA stuff in the States. I don't even know what it's called in Canada. And like there's confidentiality. And I think there's probably some stuff that HR can't tell, there's confidentiality. But in the 1930s, this wasn't necessarily a standard practice. And it's saying like, hey, like keeping that confidentiality can be very important. So it might be well to have a long chat with him on his return. So really explaining that we're going to keep what is happening to you, your alcoholism, your treatment, all of that is going to be strictly confidential. And we're going to talk about that later on here in a bit. So it says, to return to the subject of this book, it contains full suggestions by which the employee may solve his problem. So what is this book? This book contains full suggestions on which all of us here at this meeting today, here at the study today, can solve our problem. That does not mean I am cured, but that is what it means to be recovered. The problem is solved. You know what I'm saying? The mental obsession is gone. It is lifted. That is what is on offer, right? So yeah, Rob put it in all caps. Solve, solve, not white knuckle. Hold on, just for today. No, solve. Now, what do I got to do? I got to follow its suggestions. Absolutely. But I will point out we don't have alternatives. If you're like, I don't like these, we don't have like a dollar menu. You know what I mean? We don't have like alternative. There's no gluten-free option. Oh gosh, I'm sorry for those that are celiac. We do have a spiritual gluten-free option, but we got to work the steps too. You know what I'm saying? I just didn't want anyone with celiac to feel bad. Alrighty. So it's a suggestion, but that's all we got. So it says to you, some of these ideas which it contains are novel. Like, that's pretty weird. That's, you know what I mean? Perhaps you are not quite in sympathy with the approach we suggest. So saying maybe you don't like it. Maybe you're thinking, oh, spiritual? Ugh. You know, like it, and this is for the employer, but we can look at it through our own personal lens. Perhaps we're showing up to these 12 steps and we're like, that's a pretty wacky idea. Perhaps I'm like, I'm not a fan of those steps. I mean, who's a fan of them before doing them? You know, nobody's jazzercised to do the steps, you know? And it says, by no means do we offer it as the last word on the subject. We're not saying it's the only option. We're not saying it's the only, this is what we have to offer, but there's other things that you can try. But it has worked with us. And that's something we can't deny. Experientially, that this is a way of life that works. I can argue it, I can fight on a lot of things, but I can't argue on experience. So, and believe me, we're people we'll try. And this is what I love. After all, are you not looking for results rather than methods? And I think that's so important, because what we have here is results. This works. This works. I mean, I think those of us who are here today are a testament to this works. But also, you know, I was kind of joking about the motives things, but it's that idea that what I think about the steps does not matter. Being afraid of the steps does not matter. Thinking that I am not deserving of the life that is on offer as the result of the 12 steps does not matter. That idea that like thinking like it's to this or to that, like my opinion on the steps does not matter. Like none of that matters. My feelings about the steps does not matter. Like this is good news. None of that matters. Here's the bad news though. I gotta do them. You know that. Oh, that's the bad news. Like I gotta do them. I gotta do them as a way of life. But like, man, the things that I thought were barriers was like, I don't know if this could work for me and this and that. Like none of that matters. If I just dive in, our experience that this works. And I had a sponsor for a number of years who would always talk about like just run it like an experiment. She was kind of like scientifically minded. I can run the 12 steps skeptically, and I can do it with the best. Like I got to give it my best, but if I give it my best, it will work despite myself. Anyone here ever got well despite themselves? Anyone here ever like have a sponsor be like, listen, you got to take that through the columns. You got to do some inventory. Anyone here ever had me tell you to take it through the columns and do some inventory? So you guys are like, oh God, Paige, you know, ever have that experience and begrudgingly put pen to paper, or begrudgingly made that amend, or begrudgingly reached out to that newcomer and took them on as a sponsee? And then what happened? Get better, feel better. There's a magic that's not magic. There's a miracle that happens when I take actions that I don't super duper want to take, you know? Like, yeah, that's what happens here. So we can run it as an experiment. We don't have to. If I do it, if I don't, my experience is you know, if I don't do it, I don't get well. So it says, whether your employee likes it or not, the truth about alcoholism is the hopelessness of this illness. That idea that for somebody like me, I will relapse. And that idea of if I have this illness is fatal. I will die, right? I will relapse. I will relapse. I will relapse, and inevitably I will die. That is the grim truth of alcoholism. And here's something that's interesting. That won't hurt him a bit, even though he does not go for this remedy. Because it's important to be honest with people about what the nature of this illness is. And again, for me, and one of the themes, there's so many themes in this book, but one of the themes is that hopelessness. I've got to come to that place of hopelessness, come to that place at the end of myself. And when I'm there, then I'm able to grab a hold of the hope that's on offer. You know what I'm saying? Hopeless to hope. And so even if somebody's not open, if I can learn what alcoholism is, if I can learn what this illness is, and I can see and pair my experience with this illness, and I can begin to see that hopelessness, man, that's the thing that might really help, me come to the end of myself. So we suggest that you draw the book to the attention of the doctor who is attending to your patient during treatment. If the book is read the moment the patient is able, while acutely depressed, the realization of his condition might come to him. Hopeless to hope. And I'm going to say something a little bit controversial. Whenever I say something a little bit controversial, I always say it's not that controversial because I still need y'all to like me. I haven't overcome that yet. Like, God has not removed that defect completely. You know what I mean? But here's something I'm going to say, and you can feel free to disagree. Feel free to write inventory on me. I'll even help you do it. But here's my sort of thing is I don't believe that there's a rock bottom. I don't. I haven't seen it. I haven't found it. You know what I've found? What I've found is that I get into enough pain that a window of willingness opens, where I'm in so much pain and so much hurt that window opens. And in that moment, I think we all know what it's like if we don't take that action. If we don't do that stuff, that window closes. And if that window closes, I drink again or I use again. And you can see it in yourself. I'm sure I'm the only one. But anyone ever have that? And when you know in your gut that you owe an amends? You know it. It's there and it's twisting. And you have that little window where you're like, okay, I'm going to do it. And then something happens and then you kind of push it away and that window closes. You know what I mean? And you're like, oh, I'm not making that amends. I can see it even in that. And so here's kind of what I found is like, I found that we all have these windows of willingness. At least when I work with people, I see that window of willingness. And that's why when I start working with people, we go hard and we go fast at this work so that we can get enough of the solution, like driving us to the solution, the spiritual awakening, so that when that window inevitably closes, and it always does, because that's the nature of this thing, that there's enough, like God is like a wedge propping it open so that we can continue on this way of life. You know what I'm saying? Because how often have we heard or said, like, man, I've hit my rock bottom and drank again and used again and used again. You know what I'm saying? So for me, it's important to understand a relapse is inevitable, regardless of how bad it was last time. Now, how bad it was last time might buy me a bit of time, but I got to use that time to get into this work. So I have that spiritual awakening, and then the problem is solved. And then I'm not trying to pry open a window. You know what I'm saying? At least that has been my experience. And if you're like, I strongly disagree with you, that's cool. We can write inventory on me. It's fun. It's fun. I got a lot of defects. We'll figure them out and call them to it. Then I'll help you out and call them for it. Rock and roll. All right. So it says, so we hope the doctor, we hope the doctor will tell the patient the truth about his condition, whatever that happens to be. When the man is presented with this volume, it is best that no one tell him he must abide by its suggestions. The man must decide for himself. That we have to, on page 30, I need to concede to my innermost self that I have this illness. And we'll see, like we read it on page 144, but it's a major theme in the chapter 2 Wives. That idea of I can't force somebody into sobriety. Man, I can try, but I can't force them into this thing. We have to let people have the dignity of their own experience. And it says, you are betting, of course, that your changed attitude plus the contents of this book will turn the trick. In some cases, it will, and in others, it may not. But we think if you persevere, the percentage of successes will gratify you. As our work spreads and our numbers increase, we hope your employees may be put in personal contact with some of us. Meanwhile, we are sure a great deal can be accomplished by the use of this book alone. And again, that's part of why we study this book and why we go through this book and why we're hanging out today and doing this. And the reason is because this book was written and published and sent out into the world to precisely carry the directions on how people like us can recover. You know, it contains what they were hoping was the full set of directions for people like us. And keep in mind the privilege, right? I'm right now I'm in Illinois. Normally I'd be in Calgary. I was in Ohio for a bit, you know what I mean? But I might be a lone alcoholic in the middle of nowhere and only have a copy of this book. And what I would have to do is follow the directions as outlined in this book to get well, not have the privilege or the gift of a sponsor, somebody to take me through, not have meetings to Zoom in on, let alone to go to in person, not have an intergroup, not have pamphlets, not have any of that, but just a copy of this book. And they wrote this book with the hopes that it would have everything that one needed to recover. And that's the purpose of this book, to help those of us. And again, why we study it, because it's the directions. You know, as a friend of mine talks about, this is the map, it is not the treasure, but it is the way to the treasure. You know what I mean? And if I was lost in the desert, or if I was lost in Illinois or Indiana, I'd sure as heck want to follow the map, and I'd want to follow the directions to get where I need to go. You know what I'm saying? So, but it says, in some cases it will, and in others it may not. But we think that if you persevere, the percentage of successes will gratify you. And I just want to talk about that real quick. That idea that, man, again, I don't have to argue. I don't have to debate. Like, this thing works. When we do this, when we follow the directions outlined in the book, it just works. You know what I mean? It works. So it says, as our work spreads and our numbers increase, we hope your employees may be put into personal contact with some of us. Meanwhile, we are sure a great deal can be accomplished by the use of the book alone. On your employer's return, talk with him. Ask him if he thinks he has the answer, if he feels free to discuss his problems with you, if he knows you understand. You will not be upset by anything he wishes to say. He will probably be off to a fast start. And it's interesting because the context of that paragraph is an employer kind of offering, this way of life to an employee. But I found like that idea of like, that's how I try to show up in sponsorship. Not asking, do I think you have the answer? That's usually not a good way to go with sponsees. They're like, yes, my grand ideas, as I am, when I get my grand ideas. But that idea that like showing up with that sense of understanding, showing up as an even keel, showing up with understanding, not being upset. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I genuinely try to meet people where they're at, because that's what this book does. I've found again and again and again, this book meets me where I'm at and then takes me where I need to go. And so it says, in this connection, can you remain undisturbed if the man proceeds to tell you shocking things? He may, for example, reveal that he has padded his expense account. That kind of came full circle in the example, in the example on page 65, where it's like, we're mad at our employer for being unjust, unreasonable, and threatened to fire me for padding my expense account. But also, we talked about how we can make amends for those things in step 9. So it's a kind of cool full circle experience. And it says, so he may, for example, reveal that he has padded his expense account, or that he's planned to take your best customers away from you. In fact, he may say almost anything if he has accepted our solution, which, as you know, demands rigorous honesty. Can you charge this off as you would a bad account and start fresh with it? and some of us are not jazzed about this. It says, if he owes you money, you may wish to make terms. Oh man, I gotta pay back my amends. And so what we're seeing in that paragraph is preparing the employer to receive an amends. That it's preparing the employer for the amends process. That idea, okay, can I hear these things? Can I be open to this? And yeah, if we owe money, we gotta pay it back. And it says, page 145, if he speaks of his home situation, you can undoubtedly make helpful suggestions. Can he talk frankly with you, so long as he does not bear business tales or criticize his associates? So can you have that open relationship as long as there's not gossip or venting or criticizing? That's what it's saying. With this kind of employee, such an attitude will command undying loyalty. So it's also an appeal to, that if we're trying to, save alcoholics for business reasons, hey, if you're showing up and being a good person to your employee, they're more likely to be loyal to you. Crazy. And this next sentence is one that I come back to far more than I would like to. But it says, the greatest enemies of us alcoholics are resentment, right? We read and we've seen resentment is the number one offender, destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From resentment stem all forms of spiritual disease. Man, I will have resentment, but I cannot live in resentment. That's why we have the 4 columns on resentment. Jealousy. That idea of wanting that which other people have, jealousy. Envy, which is like jealousy's cousin, like, what about me? And man, I remember this is for me. Anytime I catch myself thinking, what about me? That's how I know I've slipped right back into self. It's what about me is like, oh, that's a little red flag. I'm in trouble. And so the greatest enemies are resentment, jealousy, envy, frustration, and fear. Now I'm going to talk about fear for a sec. Fear, right? It's that evil and corrosive thread that my life is shot through with it. And man, it should be classed with stealing, cause more trouble. So we see resentment, fear. We see how awful that is. We see how envy and jealousy. But what I want to point out is the word frustration. And I don't have it. I don't have it on. Actually, Rob might have a copy of it. No pressure if you don't. But a little while ago, I know you're like, what are you talking about? A little while ago, hold on. Let me go back a couple steps in my mind, because all over the place, just like Hank. He's my homie. I'm sure we're all spiritual giants here. We just float into meetings on a cloud of serenity and sobriety. I know we all do. So I'm sure no one here has ever done that thing where you call somebody out for a 10th step, or you reach out to your sponsor and they say, that sounds like a resentment. Let's take it through the columns and say, no. It's not a resentment. And then we pull out our little thesaurus and we're finding any other word to describe it. It's not a resentment. I'm just a little frustrated. You know what I'm saying? There's that word, frustration. And I want to minimize it, but I see that word there. And what's interesting about frustration, it's like a little pin in my side. It's just a little frustrated, but it's there every moment of every day, just a little frustrated, but it's there. And so what I did, and it was just a joke, but it's got to been helpful and funny, is I made some frustration columns. So I took the resentment. I shouldn't spoil it, but here's what I did. I took the resentment columns, crossed out resentment and angry, and just wrote frustrated, and made that. It's okay if you can't find it, Rob. It's no worries. But that was the thing I did. So when I had sponsees or people that were like, it's not a resentment, I'm just a little frustrated. I'm like, how wonderful. We have the frustration columns right here. Rob's got it. Thank you, Rob. So if you're thinking, man, I'm not resentful, it's not a resentment, just a little frustrated, you got it right there. We eerily similar to those resentment columns, and yet completely different. Nothing like it. It's fine. You can do those. But so that's something I wanted to point out there. So our greatest enemies are of any alcoholic are resentment, jealousy, envy, and fear. Whenever men are gathered together in business, there will be rivalries, and arising out of these, a certain amount of office politics, the jealousy, gossip, politics, all of that. And it says sometimes we alcoholics have an idea that people are trying to pull us down. And I want to point something out. It says often, which I'm going to say is almost always for us. This is not so at all, And it says, but sometimes our drinking will be used politically. So sometimes people can use that, especially in office and work. So that takes us just about to the hour. So why don't we wrap it up there? Because I know I'm not going to get through that next paragraph in a minute. Again, I want to thank you all for coming, and next week we'll pick it up. And yeah, I know it's truly a privilege to be able to do this. So thank you. I'll stop the recording and or maybe Rob will do it. Let me see. Oh no, I can do it. We'll stop the recording and wrap up with a prayer.